We do have the stats. Eric, could you pull up the stats? This is a general social survey. The Washington Post reported on this most recently as of 2018. So young men driving the decline in sex, share of men and women between ages 18 and 30 reporting no sex in the past year. So 28% of men versus 18% of women. I think this graph would essentially prove that there are more women engaging in casual sex than there are men. There's also something from Pew Research. Eric, if you can look in the infographics tab, there's Pew Men More Single and Pew Men More Single 2. And this is more recent than that 2018 GSS survey that the Washington Post reported on. Eric, can you let me know when you have those pulled up? There should be two of them.
Was that last study single women? Is it single men and women, or is it both?
Which one?
The one you just pulled up, was it single? Is that accounting for people in relationships or just single men and women?
Well, it's the share of men and women between ages 18 and 30 reporting no sex in the past year.
Yeah, so some of them are in relationships. I'm just saying.
Well, I'm not sure how is that relevant to the statistic. I'm just trying to.
Because there's a difference between having casual sex and being in a monogamous relationship, which is the point that you were making.
Okay, hold on. Eric, can you pull up the initial graph so we can, the initial one? Oh, did you X out of it? So it doesn't really differentiate, but I mean, I suppose some of these people are in sexless relationships, but it's talking about reporting no sex in the past year. So I'm trying to understand whether if they're in a relationship or not has any bearing on this specific infographic.
Because the point that you were making was that this is what you said, that women are more promiscuous than men. So you're showing whether or not they've had those encounters, but you're not saying whether or not they're in a relationship or single. And maybe your next statistic talks about single ones, but I'm just saying specifically for that one. So the case that you were making was that women are more promiscuous than men, and I want to know the statistics specifically on how single women are more promiscuous.
I think but the graph just showed that there are a greater proportion of women who have reported having sex than men.
Yeah, but
that could be women in relationships.
Exactly.
But typically in a relationship, you've paired off 1-to-1. Therefore, if there's a larger proportion of women who are engaging, it's plausible that there are. Well, I think this is actually the case, that there's women who think they're in relationships with a guy when really that guy has multiple women. But that would suggest that, in any case, let's see the other infographic. You did pull up both of them, right? Yep. Okay, the share of single men in the U.S. who are looking for dates or a relationship has declined since 2019. Okay, so that shows that, the share of single, percent of single U.S. adults who say they are looking for a committed romantic relationship and or casual dates. So single men, single women, 61%, this is in 2019. I think the other one's actually more important, but so single men, 50% versus single women, 30%. I think it's the other one that's more relevant, the number 2. Okay, 3 in 10 Americans report being single, but this varies by age, and this next one's important, by gender. So 3 in 10 Americans report being single. Between the ages of 18 to 29, 63% of men are reporting being single. Oh, fuck.
Alvin donated $100. Stay safe, even if those stats may be true. That does not help address the declining marriage rates. Men shouldn't be getting married just to prove a point that they won't get depression or be a criminal, especially when you consider the financial risks.
Yo, Alvin Sam, good to see you in the chat. Thank you, man.
Yeah, I will say there's a lot of misinformation about divorce rates in the U.S. A lot of people will repeat this trope that 50% of marriages in the U.S. end in divorce. It's actually around 45%. And then if you look even deeper at that, if you look at first-time so if a man and a woman who are both getting married for the first time, that national divorce rate average is actually 35%. Because if people are getting married let's say you're on your second marriage, your divorce rate goes up from 35 on average up to 63. And then if it's your third marriage, your divorce rate goes up to around 70 or 71%. So this 44% national average stat is getting sort of inflated by people that are on their second or third divorce, or people that are, they're getting divorced super quickly and sort of flippantly. And then it's sort of different by various socioeconomic or racial demographics. If you look at like my wife and I are both white, we both got married for the first time. We're not on our second marriage or second divorce. Our national average divorce rate is 13%. So suddenly you start sort of looking at the nuance of these divorce rates, and it's like, well, it's actually maybe not as bad as you think it is. We all are thinking 50%. It's actually, for my demographic, it's 13%. It's not as bad as you've sort of been ingrained to think it is, because these numbers are, like I said, they're sort of stat padded by people that are serially getting divorced over and over and over again. I think there's a certain amount of anti-marriage and anti-family propaganda in the country, sort of trying to compel you guys from not getting married, but what's that? Are you the propagandist? You're the propagandist.
I'm the anti-marriage propaganda arm, propaganda minister. In any case, let's Alvin, Sam, thank you very much for your two TTSs there. Really appreciate your support. Good to see you in the chat, man. Let's pull back up that stat I was kind of getting to. So the big one is gender here. 3 in 10 Americans report being single, and that's just taking everybody into account. But it varies by age and gender. If you look at ages 18 to 29, if you go to about the 4th grouping down, it says men ages 18 to 29 are reporting being 63% are reporting being single. In that same age cohort for women, just below it, ages 18 to 29, only 34% are reporting being single. So what's going on there? That's very shocking that in their exact same age cohort, you have women who are not single, but you have a large swath of men who are. So it could be explained by, for example, perhaps, women might be dating an older age demographic. Women, generally speaking, it skews, I think, on average, maybe 2-3 years older than them typically, at least for marriage. But it would suggest to me that you have a not minimal cohort of women who are dating a small pool of men.
I think you've seen a lot of data come out of Tinder or what's it called? Not OnlyFans. OkCupid, this dating site, where it sort of highlights this is to your point, this sort of sexually hypergamous situation where it's like the top, this is your Giga Chad, your 8 out of 10, 9 out of 10, 10 out of 10 guys that are having free range in having sex with women from, men are not so picky sexually, right? A 10 out of 10 guy will sometimes be in the mood to have sex with a 5 out of 10 girl. Sure. Whatever, it's a bad day, whatever. And so, yeah, you're having the top Giga Chad type of guys that are sort of having free reign amongst all of the girls. And then that means that 70 or 80% of men are not having access to these women.
I think what's happening is you have some hyper sexual, hyper promiscuous men at the very top. And then you have some like medium tier, and that's a small percentage of men that are like hyper promiscuous, where they'll like, you'll have some women like that too. Then you'll have a higher proportion of women who are like, let's say, medium levels of promiscuity. And then you'll have like a huge swath of men that are basically incapable of engaging in hookup culture or promiscuity simply out of necessity. They can't engage in hookup culture or promiscuity because they just don't have the looks or the charisma or whatever it may be. And just the last thing I'd point out, if it was the case that there's equal levels of promiscuity between men and women, how would you then explain, for example, the incel phenomenon, which doesn't exist in women?
What's the incel phenomenon?
Are you familiar with incel?
Yes.
Oh, incel. So that stands for involuntarily celibate. So basically, men who sometimes they add like a period of time for it, but basically men who are involuntarily celibate despite their want and desire to have a sexual relationship with a girl. They're just either they're unattractive or they are severely lacking on some social front or whatever it may be. They cannot get sex.
I think what's more sad about this conversation is that we're living in an era where promiscuity, multiple partners, engaging in casual sex is somehow glorified over having a monogamous relationship. So I don't know about the women here. I feel like we've kind of been on this tangent for a little bit, but I'm genuinely curious, like, do each of you want to find a life partner, to find somebody that you can be vulnerable with, to give your love to mutually take care of each other?
Well, I have a question for you. Do you
Yes.
think monogamy is like the right way, like the only way it should be? Like, do you not think non-monogamous relationships are okay?
No, I don't think non-monogamous relationships are okay, and here's why. I think that in order to be fully vulnerable and to give yourself fully into your relationship, let's put it that way, it has to be with one person. And when you're in a monogamous relationship, it opens room for full sacrifice, full love, full giving of the other person. And it allows us, especially as women, to be fully vulnerable with our man, knowing that he's going to take care of us and that we don't have to put up this, protection over our hearts and over, us as individuals and our spirits. So I think that, yes, relationships need to be monogamous. And again, if we look at the satisfaction and the fulfillment that people get out of relationships, statistically, partners feel happier and more fulfilled when they're in monogamous relationships. And I'm not saying that...
Is that a fact?
It's a fact, actually. It was done by the American Family Study, I believe.
But are we just going to gloss over our back and forth on the promiscuity thing?
You never proved that. So you brought up a statistic that did not talk about... You brought up the singleness, okay? But you said...
Well, Maddie, you're taking sides.
No, I will say, okay, so I
question.
do agree. Okay, I do agree that women are more promiscuous, but the stats that you brought up are 63% of men are single. That doesn't mean they're not promiscuous.
Right.
Can I say something
Because
real
only
quick?
single men can be promiscuous.
I think that men would be as promiscuous as women if they could be, but they don't.
Yeah,
They don't have the
exactly.
options.
Okay,
That's what I said
regardless of
earlier.
whether we think it or not, based on the statistics that you showed, there's not sufficient evidence. So if you can bring me sufficient evidence that shows the statistics on single women and promiscuity, then we can have that conversation in more depth.
Also-
but the ones that you brought were not.
Like, so
Hold on, but the sex frequency... Okay, here, pull up the sex frequency one. Hold on, we'll come back to you.
That doesn't account for women in relationships. It just says
I don't see- but-
world study on men and women. It doesn't say anything about single, multiple partners or anything like that. And you're using specifically the word promiscuous.
I mean, maybe I'm hold on, keep it up. Maybe I'm R-slurred here, but I'm failing to see how your argument about whether, with
What
this...
does promiscuous mean?
With this
I
specific
have a
graph...
perspective here. Okay, so let's just say you're right? And women are more promiscuous. And then what? Like, men are better? Like, what are we trying to argue here? Like, are men
Okay,
better or
I'll
are
answer your
women
question.
better? Like, I think that they're different, and all of these... everything we're talking about is so situational. Like, this isn't like such a black and white issue. Like, oh, are women worse or are men worse? Like, I feel like
that's not-
it's like pitting them against each other more instead of like talking about like ways that we can try and understand each other. And like, it's okay for some people to have faults in certain ways and others in other ways.
Thank
But
you
okay,
for
Like,
saying
we
that.
can could like, instead of like
The point
arguing
is
who's worse,
that
like then
it
what?
degrades women to say that women are more promiscuous than men. So it's not
Yeah.
about who's better. But if you're going to make a statement
How's it
about
degrading
that,
women if it's
promiscuous,
just true?
what does promiscuous mean? What is promiscuity?
Promiscuity would essentially, if you, my view of it would be if you engage in casual sex.
Why does that
Yeah,
have
so-
to be degrading?
Promiscuity could
The
also
way
be,
that
hold on.
he's
You engage in casual
packaging
sex, you have
it
multiple
is-
partners, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
I think
Yes.
men are evolutionarily designed to be more promiscuous.
Men have a higher
I agree
sex
with
drive.
that.
Men have a higher sex drive. However, men are less able to act on said. Like it's much harder for men to secure sex than it is for women to secure
Why?
sex.
Is it because women can choose
Why?
who they sleep with, where men just sleep with anyone?
But
No, it's
why
just-
is it
it's-
harder
standards?
Let me.
or
Okay,
what?
here.
for men? Why do you think it's harder for men?
Women sleep with who they want. Men sleep with who they can.
Why do you think that is?
Well, there's a biological basis. I think women are the sexual selectors, for example.
What's
But also women are more
what's-
selective. Women are more picky.
Like they have standards?
It's because for 99
Yes,
point,
but that-
maybe some women are like that because they're worried about being seen as promiscuous are getting judged, so that leads them to be more picky.
For all of human history, prior to advent of birth control in the 1970s, if a woman is having promiscuous sex, there's a very high chance that she'll get pregnant and she'll be tied down to a man that she might not even love. Her body will go through enormous changes for 9 months. She'll have to take care of a baby. She'll have to grow a fetus inside of her. That's why, biologically, female promiscuity is generally not a great thing. That's why women have evolved not to want to do that. They want to lock down one man. That's how women ought to behave, which is why generally if a woman is super promiscuous these days, it's sort of counter to her biological nature.
Promiscuity in general is just not a great thing.
I agree with you
But men
totally.
and women work hand in hand to create promiscuity.
I think we
so.
can all agree,
It's a
anyone
culture.
going out and being extremely promiscuous is not a good thing.
Shut it down. 2024, no promiscuity. Shut it down.
Like, you wanna
Get
know,
married,
it's a
have
good thing,
kids,
you
get
know,
married,
getting
tie
to
the
know
knot,
each
say no to
other,
promiscuity 2024.
Loving each other, being honest with each other, listening,
Hell yeah.
seeing
Yep.
other people's perspectives, that's a good thing.
Okay,
True.
but so I can answer your thing about
It's
why
not a competition, y'all.
Okay,
it's
but
not
I
the
c- I
men and
can-
women competition.
I can answer your thing as to why we're having this discussion, and it stemmed from this idea that, well, men ought to be leaders, and it's men are to blame for the current state of affairs between the sexes. And I mean, my view
I didn't
is
say that.
okay. My view is that
It sounds like you just want to be blamed.
I have no idea what you're talking about, but
What's it? What
I mean,
is
I can
it
explain
like?
it to you.
I'm the one I'm a radical man blamer. I blame men to the ultimate degree. I'm a man hater. I hate them.
But that's not
Men
good
are always
either, because
responsible.
we actually have a problem in our society where we were kind of talking about this before the show, like we've created this society that nonstop bags on men and trashes on masculinity. And I'm not saying that all men are perfect. They're certainly not, and men have failed society in many ways. But this narrative that masculinity and men are toxic, they're bringing everything bad to society, is just, first of all, just
I
certainly
agree
not
with
true,
that.
and it hurts men and also hurts women. This narrative hurts women.
Yeah, and I feel like as a woman who experiences that, I want to try and be more understanding of what that's like for men, and not just be like women are the only people who experience that. Like, we both experience that in different ways, and I feel like sometimes women struggle with that, gets highlighted more, just maybe because what we're going through in this time. But that doesn't mean that it doesn't exist for men too.
Well, I'll say I look at a lot of this. Oh, here we go. Joel Bell.
Joel Bell donated
Thank you, Joel.
$99. Lady, only 40% of men have reproduced historically, compared to 80% of women. This has been proven through DNA research. A quick Google search will show the studies. Most men won't reproduce. Women are by their very nature more promiscuous than men.
Like,
You
okay,
can't,
all right,
can't
so
relate
women are
those
more
things to each other. You guys
promiscuous, so I
are so
hope that
ridiculous. Maybe someone should do an actual study on this and then
I
bring
mean,
us the statistics, and we can come back and
we've-
discuss it.
and-
okay,
I will
we've
say-
had we've
Then
had,
what?
let's go back to capability though, because that's a big
Hold
a
up,
big,
wait.
hold on.
This is the exact opposite of female promiscuity. If 40% of men are breeding and 80% of women are, that means that it's one man and multiple women more often
But,
than
okay,
not.
so-
That's actually male promiscuity. What are you talking about? That's the opposite of your point you're trying to make. That's one man, two women.
Oh God.
That's
Yeah,
male
but
promiscuity.
here's the difference: is you could have one man who impregnates 20 women.
Yep.
So you could have like a top tier of men that are capable of sleeping with like 100 women, but you might have 100 women who are more promiscuous than the average man. I would say the average woman is more promiscuous than the average man, simply by virtue of the fact that they are more capable. That's the big thing. Capability is a very important component of this discussion. Women
Yeah.
are more capable of being
Why
promiscuous.
is that a big thing, though? Like,
on.
Doc Venabilis
Hold on.
donated $100.
Yeah, thank you, Doc. Appreciate it.
The studies are indeed confounded by access to sex. If the numbers
Capability.
are adjusted by number of partners per sexually active individual, or individual sexual activity rate, then the few sexually active men will win the contest.
Word?
I feel like everybody's promiscuous. Like,
Nope.
No.
we're
That's
all
not true.
we're all just some freaks.
And also,
Unfortunately,
Even-
that
well, not
unfortunately
really.
our society has created that narrative, though.
Right. I'm just like generalizing here, but like I'm just saying like everybody is different. Like I'm just still confused where this argument is going of like
well, we're
men are
having a
more-
conversation about it.